This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is the one that everybody wants, me.
Becky Lynch is going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my idol. You're going to acknowledge me.
Welcome back, guys, to another week of Rampage Roundup. I think we're sticking with that for right now.
I thought it was a wrestling roundup. Wait, wrestling rampage.
As you can see, I brought Matt Tomasetti back this week because he was good last week. And apparently you guys liked him. He knows more about wrestling than me. He's a wrestling whisperer.
Well, thank you, Mary Grater, host of the Rampage Roundup. Still a working title.
It's still a working title.
Got to find you some music. Got to find you a title for this podcast. But that being said, I've been asked back for another week, which is, I would say, flattering. But at the same time, I never in 10 million years, I would have guessed that the sun would have burned out and consumed the earth before I ever was asked onto a wrestling podcast. But then here we are in the year 2021. And Mary has asked me two weeks in a row now to be on her podcast to talk about the superior AEW wrestling. And here we are. And I'm very excited. I'm thankful. Thank you, Mary. Thanks. I'm back. Thanks, Mary.
You see how he's doing this coy thing right now? He's actually much better than he acts. Matt Purcell, the lovely leader of WWE Podcast Unofficial, was saying that we had good chemistry and that people liked you. And that's because you make stupid things and make me laugh. And you're the wrestling whisperer. And don't sell yourself short, Matthew.
I am the whisperer.
You are.
Let the audience know that I know exactly what is in store for professional wrestling.
So how was your week in professional wrestling? Because I apologize to listeners about this getting up late because last night I was actually falling asleep during Rampage because I was very tired. I've had a long week. And I mentioned to Matt, it was probably because I watched SmackDown beforehand and I clocked out at 37 minutes. So here's the new gimmick is that I'm going to turn into SmackDown every week and see how long I can last. And this past week, it was 37 minutes. You know what came on the screen that made me turn off and go back to Daredevil? Because I'm rewatching Daredevil right now in preparation for Spider-Man No Way Home.
Marvel's Daredevil, the current Netflix series you're referring to.
Yes, the old Netflix series, which is superior to almost every... I know this is a wrestling podcast. I'm going to be a nerd for comics right now. Right. The most superior, the line, and we've had these debates because we were both comic people, the bar for all TV show comic book shows. I know you are a big fan of The Boys. I am too. But Daredevil season 2 is the bar. That's
Apex. The Apex. I will agree with that as well. But you know what, Mayor? That's talk for another podcast.
What I was saying was, I digress. I was watching SmackDown and I've been watching Daredevil or rewatch in preparation for Spider-Man No Way Home because of rumors and me being a nerd like that. And I turned it off at 37 minutes. Do you want to take a swing as what came on my screen and why I turned off?
All right, so SmackDown. So you're watching SmackDown from this past week and you tuned out at the 37th minute. Now, my guess is I don't have a guess because I have no clue what is happening.
I think you absolutely
on
know.
Anything WWE. Oh, I do. In fact, was it a bit involving Happy Guy? What's his name? Happy Corbin.
Very good.
Corbin. So Apex, the Apex Wrestling League, the WWE, not in competition with AEW by any means.
Not at all.
Broke your spirit at the 37-minute mark because of a very, how would you call it? Strange storyline or predictable storyline
Here's
for the
my
way
thing.
WWE.
Like, not to get off AEW, but this is the thing with WWE.
Yes.
WWE wants to be mainstream so bad. So they do all these things that have to do with mainstream media and try to, like the original WrestleManias, like that's why they were such a big deal. They had Cyndi Lauper there, they integrated MTV and stuff like that.
Celebrities.
But at the time they were current. Vince McMahon watches something and it'll be 5 years removed. And he'll be like, oh, that'll get the kids. So it's like the whole Logan Paul bringing that guy in. He hasn't been, the guy's a piece of crap, one. But two, he hasn't been relevant in like 4 years, but he's been on WWE TV in the last year. So my theory is that it was movie night at the McMahon Mansion, and they watched Swingers, which was relevant in 1998. And they were like, yo, that's what we should do with Baron Corbin. We're going to make him a swinger character who's like in the casino and stuff and give him an annoying sidekick. And that is what Vince McMahon thinks is going to get, because it's pop culture, but like Swingers and that whole scene was relevant when we were still in high school. That's how long ago it was. Or early 2000s. No, it was 90s. It was absolutely the 90s. And he thought that making Baron Corbin, even though I liked Baron Corbin, it was actually a funny bit. But he was like, I don't know, he wanted the casino, we're going to make a Swingers character. So that's my theory about that. And I have no tolerance for it because that guy, Madcap Moss, which is the stupidest name in all pro wrestling right now. As soon as that guy comes on the screen, I'm like, I'm out.
If anyone tuning into the Rampage Roundup here on the unofficial WWE podcast haven't been able to tell, Mary has a lot to get off her chest with the WWE. This is her platform because, well, AEW has created the alternative in order for Mary to finally blow off some steam.
I hate the people that are like, oh, well, you can't be a pro wrestling fan and bash like WWE or like whatever, you're an AEW mark. No, I've been watching WWE before I can remember. It is one of my earliest memories. My father watched pro wrestling before I was born. My brothers were watching pro wrestling. My brothers are almost a decade older than me. Now, I'm allowed to criticize WWE. I'm absolutely 100% allowed to criticize it.
Let me. So.
Like, wait, no, hold on. People are like, oh, you're too negative about it and stuff like that. That's why I wasn't on the podcast for a couple months because I told Matt, who I was doing the week in review with, I was like, I can't stomach this much longer. And obviously with Punk and my favorite wrestler going to the opposite league and like AEW is a new thing. So yeah, I have steam to blow off. I'm so angry at WWE because I've always been a fan of WWE. That's always been my home. And the fact that it's unwatchable right now. And even the Roman Reigns stuff, which is good, is getting stale because they refuse to mix it up. Like this Roman Reigns narrative, he's better as a heel. He's fantastic, but it's the same narrative that we need to make Roman the stature, like the pinnacle, and nobody else can have anything going on and nobody cares. So if Roman gets injured or Roman gets signed to do a movie or something, who do you have? Who do you have? You have nobody.
I would just like to interject here, Mary, because I am here, your guest host here on Rampage Roundup here on the unofficial WWE podcast. I don't give a about any of it. I honestly don't. I haven't liked the WWE since the end of the Attitude Era. I'm that guy. And the reason why I'm here is not to be a professional. You're the professional here. You just gave me a whole, you puffed me up a bit. I did not care one single bit for professional wrestling. I haven't cared about it for quite some time until I encountered AEW. And AEW came along in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, right? 2018? 2018.
No,
2018.
it's for 2019.
So 2019 AEW came around, and I was like, okay, well, maybe if they have an actual backer, good financial backer, unlike the TNA Jeff Jarrett outfit that was fairly low rent, and
And he screwed the pooch on that too, so it's not you.
AEW came around. To me, I was always curious because I was a huge pro wrestling fan back in the mid to late 90s, along with everybody else. Of course, as a kid, I loved Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and Andre the Giant, and I got to see all of my heroes at the Spectrum down in Philadelphia when I was growing up as a kid. My dad brought me to my first professional wrestling match. But I was a fan of wrestling up until wrestling started to get kind of bad after the Attitude Era. And after the WWE bought everything up, and nothing ever came of the merger between the companies. AEW came around, and all of a sudden, it's like, all right, this is an interesting curio. They're picking up some names. Chris Jericho, who I'm a fan of.
Who is technically, even though he started in WCW, he's a WWE lifer. His career was made in WWE.
So for someone like Chris Jericho to hop on to an outfit like AEW, point is, just to finish my point, is that I really haven't been paying attention to WWE. You have. I've completely detached from professional wrestling up until AEW. And I don't want to, make it seem like, oh, I've been on with the AEW since the very beginning. Certainly not. I have not. It took me it took you actually to sit me down. Like, we're going to watch that pay-per-view. We're going to watch All Out. And, this is after CM Punk, who you were a huge fan of. If anyone on this podcast doesn't know, Mary is a CM Punk mark through and through. And she would like for him to be her husband. But,
yes, he's my future ex-husband. I mean, all respect to AJ. I mean, she's got a lot.
I'm just trying to map out, like, I'm not coming on to this podcast acting like I know what I'm talking about. All I'm saying is that this has inspired a joy in professional wrestling that I have not experienced since 2001. This is 20 years later, and I'm enjoying this. I've been watching it every week. I like the talent. It is incredible to me. And so, the WWE, I don't care. I just don't care for what the WWE is doing at all. I don't think what I've seen, I sat down, you and I were hanging out not too long ago, and we watched Survivor Series, and I did not think it was good. There was an entire bit sponsored by Pizza Hut that was utterly, aggressively embarrassing to watch. You can say the main event was very good with Roman Reigns and blah, 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 but I just don't care.
But that you can't bank a company on one person, and they've done that for so long.
If anyone listening to this is teed off, I guess, by the fact that Mary is downplaying her experience watching the WWE, well, this is probably not going to be the podcast. This is probably not going to be the podcast for you. We are here to talk AEW, man. And this week's Rampage on Friday, last night, as the time of we were recording this, AEW's Rampage had 3 key matches, which I thought were all fairly good.
Just to wrap up what we were talking about, we always have the discussion about how you didn't watch WCW before, like, the war, like you weren't even watching it during the wars.
No, I couldn't. I didn't care about WCW until the NWO became word of mouth. When people were like, no, I think you need to start watching pro wrestling. Tune in to WCW because they're doing some wild shit. And yeah, around the time that NWO, for those of you who are listening to this, who might be of age, who are watching WCW back in the day, that was pretty wild and dynamic television. I remember tuning in to the first time and catching WCW because, again, I had not been watching professional wrestling since I was probably a little kid. And now I'm a teenager, I'm in high school, and watching the number two, what was always kind of the number two to WWF or WWE, WCW, doing something so intensely weird and surprising that it became must-watch television. And it became not just about the wrestling, but it was like, this is straight up entertaining to watch. And you didn't know what was going to happen week after week. And you could say that, maybe there wasn't a whole lot of good wrestling going on or anything like that, because, you basically had 13 to 15 guys coming out at random intervals and interrupting a match or something like that. But it was like surprising. It was exciting. It was strange. And it felt good. It was good TV, genuine. And when you had, talent who came up like Raven, and you had, Benoit was still a thing back then before, Ric Flair. I mean, all of these guys were like, the people the wrestlers who I really didn't care about, suddenly I cared about. And it was very exciting to watch. And of course, obviously, then hilarity changes. And the WWE starts taking the heat away from WCW when Stone Cold.
My point was that, like, we always talk about this, and I bring up my dad a lot with wrestling because that's where I started watching wrestling. It's literally the only thing that me and my brothers had a bond of because they were so much older than me. We all watched wrestling together. My father, when all that stuff was going in the 90s, he stopped watching WWE. He was like, F Vince McMahon. He hates Vince McMahon Jr. My dad was an old school Vince McMahon Sr., and he just was like, this is all garbage and stuff. And at the time, we're like, yeah. And he's right. Like, at the end of the day, my dad called that guy being a hack. And I'm going to get so much heat for this. We also talk about how Vince kind of Kramered his way into all his success. The only thing that is original Vince McMahon that was a success was The Undertaker, and it was because he was doing all this campy stuff at the time. And my father was like, no, this isn't wrestling. So I was watching WCW. Like, I knew about Sting. I knew about the Four Horsemen. I knew who Steve Austin was before Steve Austin was. The Hollywood Blondes was like my favorite tag team when I was a kid. I remember Austin being the TV champ for like 4 years. And I remember watching it with my dad and being like, he's still champ. Like, it was crazy. And when I bring these things up to you, you're like, I don't know about that. And it's just weird. So in retrospect, coming full circle, like my dad criticizing Vince McMahon so much, and my dad, before he passed away, would still turn in for like Undertaker stuff. Like if it was a special thing, he would watch WrestleMania, but he like stopped watching wrestling because as soon as Vince McMahon took over everything after Senior died, going into the 90s and going into the Attitude Era and all that stuff. I mean, obviously my dad's a different generation, so he wouldn't understand the Attitude Era things. But his claim was that Vince was going to destroy everything. And we always have this talk about anything that was popular in WWE during Attitude Era was something that he took from somebody else. Hogan wasn't him. He's still Hogan. Leading into Attitude Era, Austin was the ringmaster. And we always make the joke about Frosty McFreeze. The Rock, yeah.
Sorry, Frosty McFreeze. That was one of the
names.
The pitched names that Vince
for Austin
to Steve Austin.
And he didn't know what to do with them.
Refine his persona.
Yeah.
Frosty McFreeze.
And even The Rock. Okay. So yeah, you could say that The Rock is a homegrown WWE talent. He is. Absolutely. His father, his grandfather. But The Rock was a face at first, and he was Rocky Maivia. And it took the crowd turning on him to become what he was. That was not a Vince McMahon idea. That was something that was forced. And that's why it was so upsetting or weird when Roman Reigns came out, and obviously he's part of the same family as his cousin, and you're forcing Reigns as a face, and he's getting booed the same way The Rock was when The Rock debuted as a face. And it was like, this is like not rocket science. Turn the guy. And they do it. And it took a pandemic, and I don't know what it was. I know we've been all over the place, but my point is that my father was right about Vince McMahon. And it's really, really funny because at the time, growing up as a kid, I was like, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. But my dad was right, because everything that we've talked about, like talking about Vince McMahon and how WWE got big, if it wasn't for Stone Cold taking over his character, if it wasn't for the curtain call, if it wasn't for all that stuff that happened with Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash going to WCW, all that stuff, WCW would have won. Steve Austin saved that whole thing. And that was not because that was Vince's creation. That was Steve Austin being like, no, I'm not going to be Frosty McFreeze. I'm not going to be the ringmaster. I'm going to be me. We kind of ventured off, but WWE right now is in this really corporate thing. And it's like at any job that you're at, once the micromanaging gets really, really bad, WWE is not going to fold because they have more money than God. But I don't know what they're doing right now. And everything that their response, even though AEW is not competition, but Happy Corbin. That's their response to everything. AEW might not be getting the same ratings, or they might be below. But again, I've always said, like, we live in a different time now. This isn't about TV ratings. You don't know how many people watch it on demand. You don't know how many people stream it. So it's just a better product overall because these people aren't handcuffed to stuff. WWE has released so many talents in the last 2 years that is just baffling. There are some people that are backstage that are collecting a paycheck and they're not being utilized, or they're in catering. That's fine. But to release names like Bray Wyatt and Keith Lee and Karrion Kross, who was super over, and then they made a joke of him. He got squashed his first week that he was on main roster. It's just baffling to me. And again, we kind of went on a tangent. We were talking about why I'm doing an AEW podcast. I'm a WWE fan. I don't want WWE to fall. I don't want the McMahons to sell WWE, which it seems like in the last 2 years, that's what they're going towards. And they're trying to make it such a family-friendly product that they can sell it. I think that if the WWE is not in the McMahon's hands, it's stupid. Even if Vince is running it and he's running it in the ground, Stephanie or Shane should be taking over that product. It would be a shame. It's a legacy. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how we got here, but let's get into
it. We're here now.
On this, yes.
Allow me as your guest here on
as the guest
on Mary's podcast here this week that I don't give a damn about the WWE. I couldn't care less. What I care about when it comes to professional wrestling at this point, me, a former fan of wrestling, is that AEW has caught my attention and that I genuinely enjoy the product. I am tuning in every week, and I feel like, for the most part, and again, coming as a non-fan, non-professional, professional wrestling observer, let's say, I feel like every week you're getting a pay-per-view level experience. And I'm being absolutely honest about that.
I mean, and that's fair.
With every match, certainly not. No.
Okay, because you're focused on the wrestling and it's not so much
because
filler.
It's impressive. It's incredibly fun.
That was my point. That was why I brought up WCW. If you actually listen to me, before the Attitude Era actually happened, and the Attitude Era was actually a response because WCW was putting out a better product, professional wrestling wise, than WWE was at the time, because WWE was a bunch of characters. And that's why The Undertaker was a Kramer thing, as you like to say. Yes, that is the only thing that Vince can put in his hat. But it was because he was making Bumblebee tag teams and a Repo Man. And he just was like, oh, we're going to have a guy that's like in a morgue. I remember watching Undertaker on WCW as me, Mark Callis, and being with Paul Heyman and being in the Dangerous Alliance. And this is stuff that you don't even know what I'm talking about right now because you're like, WCW. But WCW was putting out a better product than WWE was at the time. And that's why my father started watching. We were watching both, but he started focusing on WCW because it was just better wrestling, pure-wise, and it had Flair, and it had Sting, and it had all these guys, and it had Pillman, and it had all these things. Now, when the Attitude Era came over, and WCW was killing WWE up until The Rock and Austin broke, which was by mistake. It wasn't because of Vince McMahon booking. It was because the Clique did something stupid, and the only fall guy was Triple H. Triple H was supposed to win that King of the Ring, and everybody seems to forget that Triple H was supposed to win that King of the Ring that Austin won. Austin was not booked to win that. If Austin didn't win that, we would have never gotten Austin 316. We would never gotten anything. And it would have been Triple H, who, again, in retrospect now, I respect him more as a wrestler, but at the time, he was riding Shawn Michaels' coattails. He's always been riding his coattails. He's never been Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is one of the greatest of all time. I was always a Rockers fan. I always loved him. But it's kind of the same thing. So if you're not paying attention to AEW right now, because you're so in, WWE is the product, it is the brand, it is the bar. You're kind of being like what you were at the time, being like, oh, WCW, it's NWA, it's old school. Oh, but WWE, flashy lights. But I digress. So this is where I get upset about people coming after me and being like, you're just bashing WWE to bash WWE. I'm not. I want WWE to be good. When there is competition, you get the best products out of everybody. Their response currently to AEW is subpar. And I can't see that anybody backstage with all the releases and stuff like that are like, okay, yeah, I'm sure they're trying. Nobody has the balls to step up to Vince McMahon. The boat has sailed. WWE is kind of in the position right now where they weren't taking WCW seriously at the time.
My feeling was from that era that the WCW lost the thread. And for such a strong storyline they had going with the NWO, they didn't know how. And you can maybe you can blame this on Hulk Hogan, since he was.
I am going to blame it on Hulk Hogan. The only reason I'm going to blame it on Hulk Hogan to cut you off before you even say anything is just because you mentioned Chris Jericho. Okay, and Chris Jericho was the face of AEW for a while, even though Cody kind of stabilized it. But Chris Jericho, in my opinion, when he finally retires, I think he's the greatest of all time.
I'm shaking my head.
I know you are.
And
because people say Mount Rushmore of wrestling.
I love Chris Jericho.
Okay, they say Hogan and Flair and The Rock or The Undertaker or Vince McMahon, and that's fine. And I don't necessarily disagree with it.
Steve Austin.
And Austin, yes, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with it, and this is the problem and the fight I get in with people all the time. Hulk Hogan put wrestling on the map. Absolutely deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore. Okay, he made it mainstream, but Hulk Hogan would never be at the level that Austin is, and Ric Flair, who technically and betterly on a mic than Hulk Hogan was. Hogan has 5 moves and same gimmick every time he did a promo. Flair was beyond his time. I think that Ric Flair is the greatest of all time. What I'm saying is with Chris Jericho constantly reinvents himself, and he's still good on the mic, and he can still go in the ring, and he's not this huge guy. Chris Jericho has done more for wrestling, bringing attention to the smaller wrestlers Chris Jericho is a cruiserweight. At the end of the day, that is how he came. So the whole thing that when you brought up Chris Jericho being the face, Chris Jericho was in WCW and he was a cruiserweight, and they had a cruiserweight division, like you said, with Benoit and Malenko and Eddie Guerrero and all this stuff. And you had Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and all these guys in charge of creative in their characters, in their contracts, paying them buttloads of money because those were the biggest stars that they could steal from WWE. And they were pushing these guys down. They did not want them to have their light. They didn't understand that they were, I mean, at the time they were pushing 40, but they didn't want to get the younger guy over. And that is why all those guys deflected to WWE. And that also helped WWE killing WCW. Because the talent that they had with those four guys alone and Perry Saturn, WCW wasn't letting it happen because they had the old guard in there and they didn't understand it. It's almost the same thing that is happening with WWE and AEW right now. Vince is stuck in this mentality from the 90s and the 80s, and he still can't see that the little guy, Punk, O'Brien, those are the guys that are carrying because they can do more. You do have big guys that can do crazy stuff like Kevin Owens, Kevin Steen. But if you are not going to develop younger talent and smaller guys because you have a vision in your head that you think that a professional wrestler, and we already broke through this block in the 90s that proved that Chris Jericho's debut in WWE was one of the biggest debuts ever. And this was a cruiserweight. This was a small dude. He's already in my opinion, like Chris Jericho, I love CM Punk. Chris Jericho is always going to be a better wrestler than CM Punk. There's no, if you're taking all the aspects to make a GOAT, Chris Jericho at the end of the day is going to be the greatest of all time. Austin's career was cut short. Rock left, but they still couldn't do the crap that Chris Jericho could do. And I'm done with my rant.
Hot take.
We haven't gotten to AEW.
There is supposed to be a structure to this podcast this week, and we have gone horribly off the rails. But
yes.
That being said, and one of those segments was going to be hot takes. And if I'm not mistaken, that is a hot take.
I know there's a lot of people online that agree with me about Chris Jericho. The guy is hilarious on commentary. He can still cut a promo. He still can go in the ring. And there's a lot of similarities right now where WWE is acting like, oh, they're not competition, but they're not responding to it. You can only do kid stuff so much.
You can only do kid stuff so much. And that's the thing that troubles me about WWE right now, is that it feels like kid stuff. And I understand that there will be people who are listening to this, if you made it this deep into this podcast, who would take umbrage with that. It's not, WWE is not a product for me. AEW has taken the reins, has fully, it's caught my hackles, man. It picked up where I left off as a fan of professional wrestling back in 2001. And that's what I love about this league. That's what I love about what they're doing. That's why I love almost all of the wrestlers in this league. And I'm ashamed that I wasn't fully on board when Brody Lee was still alive, because I was like a casual. I check in from time to time. It's like, let's see what the upstarts are doing. And I remember thinking that Brody Lee, I was like, I didn't know who that guy was. I didn't watch WWE. I barely knew what was the organization he was part of, WWE. What was it?
Wait, what was that?
What was the organization? What was the family?
The Wyatt family.
The Wyatt family.
With Bray Wyatt, right? Which you have always poo-pooed about it, but...
And Brody Lee was part of... So I wasn't watching any of that. And when I tuned in from time to time, I flip over to watch to see what that strange upstart wrestling league was doing. Saw this big tall guy with this big beard. He kind of looked like Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood. only supercharged with a huge beard, and he was terrifying. He was a scary looking guy, and I was like, yeah, this is somebody who's got a lot of charisma.
And like Luke Harper, I mean Brody Lee, I mean he could move for a big guy.
He was great. And then you had, of course, you had Jericho, who's a part of this thing. I was like, maybe I should be watching this. I didn't get into it up until very recently. But what I've been watching since All In has been phenomenal. And that's why I am watching it every week. And that's why Mary has invited me here.
All right, so let's dive into Rampage last night.
We need to get into the meat of this plate.
The meat of the podcast. So Rampage last night. So the first match.
Rampage last night, which another great showing in my opinion. I don't have many criticisms because I enjoy this league so much. The night kicked off with one known and one unknown. I am not very familiar with Tony Nese, but of course TNT champion Sammy Guevara.
I told you last night, Tony Nese was in WWE. He was on the 205 product, which is still a thing. I thought they canceled it, but apparently it's still a thing. He's a cruiserweight. Anyway, great guy, solid wrestler. But you were like, I don't know who this guy is. And I was like,
no, I didn't. I was like, I figured.
You thought he was a UFC fighter.
I figured Tony Nese was kind of like another jobber.
Or an MMA guy. You said that to me at one point.
I did, because he actually, Tony Nese is built like Ken Shamrock was in his heyday in the UFC, the older days. He's a large dude. He is cut. And it just doesn't he looks like too shredded for a professional wrestler. Sort of like,
have you seen Finn Balor? Like, that's a stupid thing. Like, Finn Balor has never eaten a carb in his life.
Or for that matter, Mr. Ass.
At like fucking 60 years old, yeah.
Of the Gun Club. I keep calling him Mr. Ass. I'm sorry, I can't call him.
He is Mr. Ass. I'm an ass man.
Billy Gunn is also, at his age, chiseled out of rock, to go back to Tony Nese. Very big dude. So I didn't know exactly what his background was. An awesome match. Holy hell.
It was very good.
Very, very good, which is, typically when you're getting, any of these Guevara matches, Sammy Guevara matches, you're going to get a solid show. The dude has grown into a hell of a pro wrestler. My God. The two of them really, they put on a show. And if I'm not mistaken, Mayor, I sent you a text message and I said, hey, here's my long shot prediction. The TNT title is going to go to Tony Nese.
Yeah. And you did. And I said, counter, this is like a third match. And AEW has been very good with not putting titles on people just because they come over. So I think Sammy Guevara right now, I don't know a lot about Sammy Guevara. I know that he's been in this league for 2 years. I think he's a stellar wrestler. He has a different look, different gimmick. I don't really necessarily get it that much, but like, I don't hate him or anything like that. I think that he is very, very good for being the TNT champion right now. I don't know what's going to happen when they go to TBS because that title is probably going to go defunct. But I also didn't think at the same time that they were going to be like, oh, we're going to have Tony Nese. Like, he's been on Dark. This was his first main roster, I guess you could say, debut match. I didn't think he was going to win. But, I mean, if it's making you question it, then...
It was a long shot. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was a very good match. Equal on both respects as far as the skill involved in...
But now you're interested about Tony Nese, right?
I am suddenly interested in Tony Nese. I want to see what this guy is going to do because I'll tell you, one of the reasons why... This is why I'm not a professional. I can never have my own professional wrestling podcast. One of the reasons why I thought the title would go to him is because, his name is 2/3 of the TNT title. So I was like, okay, maybe they want to just toss it. They kind of make sense.
You're like, oh, his initials are the same as the title, so he's going to win the title. I guess.
Yeah, it's like maybe they want to keep things fresh. No,
I mean, that could be a
Sammy
gimmick in the
Guevara,
future. Tony Nese, hit up Matt for your booking.
Sure, but don't get
For your gimmick.
Right, exactly. I will keep things exciting in professional wrestling booking because, in the very least, I just want to see some weird happen. But Sammy Guevara obviously carrying his weight in the AEW, and quite frankly, he's got plenty to do with storylines and whatnot going forward. So
I mean, he's involved with Chris Jericho. He's gonna have
right. And you want to keep the belt. You want to keep the belt on him. You want to keep him going. He is a very fresh talent. And,
I mean, I don't know what his future is. I don't know who's going to challenge him for it. I mean, there's so many new young talents that you don't know when that title is going to drop.
We will see. Could be CM Punk somewhere down the line. I could see that happening.
CM Punk is above that title. Sorry.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. That's just me.
I honestly, I don't see Punk getting a lower title. If he's going to get a title, he's going to be entered into that main event. But I think that he's.
Are you debating the Wrestling Whisperer?
Yes, I am actually.
That is.
I think that Punk knows he doesn't need a title. And when he's going to go to a title, it's going to be for the main thing. But I think that Daniel Bryan is more on that course right now than Punk is. I don't know if Punk is working the gimmick of the old man really, really well, or he hasn't wrestled in 7 years. His match on Dynamite this past week was great. But at the same time, I still don't know if he's still kicking off rust or if it's just he's working this gimmick where he's like, I'm the old dude and I'm putting over younger guys. And I think he's doing that just because despite people thinking that he's a complete and utter douche, which he might be, I think he really takes value in the old school mentality of putting younger talent over him. He knows that he's an established name. And even if he's on a winning streak, he's still undefeated. I think that the matches that he does have, he's making these guys look great. The guy that he wrestled on Wednesday, it was a great match. The guy looked like he was going to beat him. And then at the end, Punk, stole it. I don't know what the long-term booking is for him. I think Punk is kind of filling it out, but we're all always waiting for the greatest thing that the devil ever did was convincing you that I did not exist. And everybody's waiting for that. So when that happens, when that Punk shows, we'll see. I thought it was going to happen with Eddie Kingston. And I think that everything I said last week with Omega getting taken out because he was injured and Jon Moxley being taken out, I think they kind of skirted where Punk was going to turn heel quicker than Daniel Bryan. And I think they're the same level. So they're going with this Daniel Bryan thing that is heel, and they don't want to have Punk go heel yet. I still don't think that we've seen what they have in store for Punk right now. I think they're still feeling out, but there might be long-term booking that we don't know about. Punk is very involved in his storyline. So
my sense is that CM Punk has to reach a certain point, which is very vague to say now that it's escaped my lips. He's going to hit a certain point where he can't go any farther, whether that's finally wrestling Bryan Danielson or somewhere down the line, maybe a Kenny Omega. Who knows?
You said Chris Jericho when he first came back to you. You're very much on it. That was
actually my take, is that eventually you're going to see CM Punk and Chris Jericho facing off. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe the thing that finally crosses the Rubicon for CM Punk to turn heel is to finally face La Champion, Chris Jericho. That could be it. There's going to be a limit to CM Punk's climb, right? At this point now, crowd is still enamored with him. Who doesn't love to see CM Punk? He's the old guy.
It's wonderful. It's very much for people who were watching wrestling at the time when he had his huge run in WWE. It's comfort, because we all knew back then how good he was. I mean, I've showed you old matches before he got to WWE. He was good then. But I think you're right. I mean, you were very, very adamant about the Jericho thing, and I was like, oh, well, they did the Jericho thing in WWE, but they did it WWE wise. I think there could have been a lot more that they could have done it if it wasn't PG.
What they've done in WWE doesn't mean anything.
The Jericho Punk program was great. It was just recycled stuff.
It doesn't matter. You can't look at it in the same sense of, the comic book world, for instance. There is no theme that has carried on for years. Eventually, CM Punk is going to face off against Bryan Danielson.
And I think that's going to be more interesting than it actually is going to be versus Jericho.
Absolutely.
Because Bryan and Punk's history with being the independents, like what I'm trying to say to you is that Punk and Bryan were that door for WWE to start signing independent wrestlers.
CM Punk is going to finish my thought, CM Punk will eventually face off against Chris Jericho. It's going to happen. Doesn't matter what's happened in the past. In WWE, none of it matters. It's going to happen in AEW because it's a different dynamic in AEW. It's exciting. It's awesome. And eventually, yes, CM Punk is going to reach a ceiling that he can't continue to achieve. And he is going to turn heel, and then the entire script is going to be rewritten.
Yeah. So, yes, we wanted to talk about, even though this is a Rampage review show, about CM Punk and MJF on Wednesday night. So, before Matt, I know you have opinions about it, and we are both MJF fans. I'm not saying I'm not. I think he is a very good heel. He does the old school thing where he stays in character outside of wrestling things. That was weak sauce from MJF this week. Like calling him PG Punk and whatever he was talking about was terrible. And I just don't know. There's this guy that I talked to on Twitter, True God, who is awesome. He tweets a lot, but he has a good wrestling brain. We talk a lot about this stuff. We DM each other all the time. And he was just like, I think Punk burned him last week. And I think that's what happened. I think the previous week, MJF came out and it was great. And Punk burned him really bad. And I think he lost confidence in himself because Punk didn't say a lot this week because he had nothing to go on. Like, it just sounded like MJF is not as... He was on commentary for Punk's match. Punk is better on commentary. Chris Jericho is better on commentary. I feel like he wasn't comfortable. It seemed like something was really off. And I don't know if it's like MJF is a very good mics man and he's very good as a heel and he's got burns for days. But I think like going up against a legend, I don't care if Punk is still active. He's a legend on the mic. I mean, he was one of the best mic men that have come out in the last 20 years. Punk's been around for a while. Something seemed really off. Everything that MJF was doing was very kindergarten WWE. I don't think that he knew how to step to him. What do you think?
Okay, so I will take a different tack. I think MJF is quite possibly the best mic man in the business at the moment. Now,
that is a disagreement, Matthew.
Wait, yes, and this isn't even the hot take segment, might I add. Look, CM Punk. Look, I am not gonna ever speak ill of CM Punk or his skill, and I still think maybe I should dial it back a bit. Punk is arguably we've had this discussion in the past. Who are the top mic people ever?
Are we having an actual discussion about this right now? You're asking my opinion.
No, you and I have already had this discussion.
Okay, but I'm putting this out there. Yes, I will
give you the top three.
Okay, you give your top three. I'll give mine. Okay.
Austin, Punk, and The Rock. Now, in no particular order. I'm not saying that's 1, 2, and 3. Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and CM Punk. And I am not putting them in order. Again, I'm going to leave it there. And Chris Jericho is in a very, very close tie there for the third place because Jericho is Lord. I will say that. And for those of you in the podcast, Mary is shaking her head vociferously.
Because like honestly, like here's the thing. I understand. Wait, hold on to cut you off real quick. I understand why people say that Austin is the best mic man of all time. I understand. I view mic skills way different than everybody else. Austin is very good on the mic, talking had the same streamline every time. I know this is going to be interpreted in the wrong way, and I'm saying this before I state what I'm going to say. I do not think that Austin is in the top 3 of all time. And I think that he is very much so, while he is better. I hate saying this because I know I'm going to get so much crap for this.
Edit.
Very much the same as Hogan. He has a gimmick. That's why people consider Hogan one of the best mic guys of all time. It's kind of the same thing recycled every time, but he like puts a skew on it. Okay. If you're saying like off the cuff, combating everybody person, Austin at the end of the day, his whole thing was like, I'm going to kick your ass, take a drink for the working man. I'm going to go do this. There was no substance to it. You saying that top 3 is Austin, Rock, and Punk, or MJF, or Jericho even. You're leaving out Paul Heyman. I don't give a that Heyman is not a wrestler. You can't have that argument without putting Heyman in it. You can't put Austin above Heyman just because he's a wrestler. Because Heyman, you were saying MJF is the best mic guy on the planet right now. Heyman is still the best mic man on the planet. What he is doing with Reigns, what he did with Punk, what he's done in the background, Paul Heyman is the bar. Now, if you're a wrestler and you can get to that point, you have CM Punk, you have The Rock. I'm never, ever going to argue the Rock argument, even though Punk owned his ass when he came back. And everybody who wants to come at me, @Mayor_Bear. The Boxing with God promo that Punk did on The Rock, because it was The Rock, is better than his pipe bomb promo. It's better because he owned him. Because at that point, The Rock was scripted. It wasn't The Rock just being The Rock. The Rock had become a character of himself, right? So very much in the same way, I feel that about Austin. I'm not saying that Austin is not good on the mic. I'm not saying that Austin, but Austin was kick ass, take names. That's it. There was no, okay, how can I get to this guy's Achilles heel? MJF is very much that. I think that MJF is fantastic. It's something that we haven't seen in a long time. But on Wednesday, I don't know if Punk scared him the week before and he felt intimidated by his elders. What he gave on Wednesday, and Punk had nothing to work with it, and Punk still owned him. That, you saying MJ, he's one of the best mic, but he's still very young.
Now it's my turn, Mayor, because
all right, this is your
no
turn.
Point in this discussion did you ever mention that we have to include those who were technically not wrestlers. Now,
I mean, we're going all the time. You have to
state for the right,
that.
because not for nothing, but Vince McMahon himself.
Yes, I was just about to say that.
Is an amazing mic man.
Just to say that.
We are not talking
in
about
his heyday on the mic in the Attitude Era was one of the best promo guys ever. I'm not going to deny that.
I understood that you wanted to include everyone, including managers or hype men or what have you, then I may have amended my. We're not talking about that. Because yes, Mary, I happen to be a Paul Heyman man.
I'm a Paul Heyman gal, so
I am a Philadelphia guy. I am from Southern New Jersey. I am a core ECW fan. I love ECW. I love Paul Heyman. Heyman has always been a god as far as wrestling has gone, and on the mic. There are very few. There's a reason why they put Paul Heyman next to Brock Lesnar, because people who can't achieve, they don't have the skills on the stick, as they say. They put Paul Heyman in because Heyman can carry that weight. He can carry that load. He's just that good. Paul Heyman is just that good. That being said, we're not talking about any of that. I'm talking about the current. Okay? In my top three, I said it before. I'm going to say it again. My top three personal: The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and CM Punk.
okay.
Now,
Like,
that is not in
before you
any
go into your
particular-
tangent. That's nothing to shake your sick at. You putting CM Punk in the same bundle as Austin and Rock is huge.
Let me finish. Okay, thank you. In no particular order: The Rock, CM Punk, Stone Cold Steve Austin. So here you have, in 2021, CM Punk has returned to professional wrestling. And yes, eventually, you're not going to be the top guy anymore. And I'm certainly not stating that CM Punk has lost a step on the mic, because I don't really think he hasn't. I don't think he has. At the
I
same
don't think
time,
he showed his cards yet.
He's also not in the role where he can achieve the type of heights that he achieved during his championship reign in the very, very bad years of WWE. And so here you have someone like MJF, okay, who doesn't really even wrestle a whole lot. I mean, he does.
And he's okay.
And he's okay. But his achievement is clearly on that microphone. So who's the other mic guy who is currently at the level that you want to achieve as a young wrestler? That person is going to be CM Punk. And what did I say at the beginning when CM Punk came in? And I started to get familiar with who MJF was, right? Because again, I'm still in a learning phase. I'm still getting to know all the wrestlers in AEW, and I think you are as well for the most part. But MJF, pretty unknown, and I've gotten to know this guy. I was like, man, he's a comedian. He's very quick. He's a quick wit, and he is sharp as hell when it comes to delivery and execution on the mic. So a long time ago, I was like, wait until you see this dude and CM Punk finally face off. And we've been getting it these past couple of weeks. And so you're right.
Wednesday was weak, man.
Here's the thing about that promo the two of them cut. First off, Punk just comes off of a pretty solid match. You know, he wins. You know, it's intense. And MJF is on commentary, and clearly, you know what's going to happen in this regard. They're both going to face off on the mic. MJF is super good at getting real. You know, he skirts that line, right? He's like kind of like the Deadpool of the league in a way. It's like getting a bit personal. Breaking kayfabe. This kind of skirting that line. It's very, very good.
His crystal meth line was very good. I'll give him that.
Right. You know, what are you gonna take shots at CM Punk for? Well, he's straight edge. He's an insomniac. He doesn't get a lot of sleep. He's got horrible bags under his eyes. He's 43, right? 42, 43. 43
he just
years
turned
old.
43.
He just turned 43, and it shows in some of his performances. Now, I would argue that CM Punk is playing up to that role. I think he's playing the role of like,
The
I
elder.
haven't been doing this. I've been out for 7 years in my early 40s. And this is gassing me. But he's still winning the matches because he's just that tough. And I love that.
I mean, CM Punk.
If that's the angle, he is selling it incredibly well. And if it's not, Punk is still building up to the point where he is athletically able to really put on a show. I think he's still great. I really do. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. That being said, MJF, who is arguably the best mic man in AEW, with the exception of CM Punk, the exception of Chris Jericho. You can only pull so much material. They did almost nearly 20 minutes of content in last Wednesday's when they finally faced off, mic to mic. The legend with that young whippersnapper in AEW. Almost 20 minutes of content. Eventually you're gonna hit a ceiling there before things start to fall off. And yes, you mentioned that promo started to get, it was like,
it felt very WWE.
It was very WWE.
You're pulling at straws.
He was reaching. There was a lot of reaching going on.
Yeah, you're saying. Like, oh,
I would say,
and it's just like,
sure, I would say,
what are you doing?
I would say, here's the thing, Mayor. Maybe you're viewing it as a longtime wrestling fan. Me, I love this, and I'm eating it up. The dog thing, all of it's kind of like weird, but you're still forgetting that MJF, there is nothing redeemable about his character. He is the heel of heels. There are no bigger heels, I feel. And you're
right in that aspect. I agree.
You can put the Young Bucks, you can put FTR into that equation, any heel you want. No one on that roster achieves heel status like MJF, and he does it with absolute perfection.
That's fine.
And so what you might consider to be an undesirable or less than, it didn't really stick the mark. The arrow didn't stick the mark. I thought it was great, and I can't wait to see the two of them face off. And that's my point.
Okay. So why did it feel so off though? That's what I'm saying. You're hyping him up so much, and I'm not disagreeing with you.
He's very, very good.
Very good. Okay, for you. But to quote, even though I haven't watched the show, if you step to the king, you best not miss. That whole promo, Punk didn't know what to do with it. So you're hyping this guy up so much. I totally feel everything you're saying, but something happened where he felt that he didn't have any material for him. And doing the PG thing, it just felt very WWE. Like you're bringing up, he was in WWE during the PG era. Until the PG era.
I kind of like the PG.
It was detrimental, I think, to MJF. I really do. Punk had a match and he struggled. He's doing the old man thing. He's doing the old man Logan thing, which is what I compare Punk doing right now. I appreciate the fact that he's trying to put over younger talent and he's very set in that. That's fine. But like, you take this MJF program right now, and this is supposed to be one of the best mic guys in the business right now, and I do not disagree with that. I mean, he's fantastic, right? But you take this program and the minuscule program that Punk had with Eddie Kingston, and the Eddie Kingston thing is blowing this crap out of the water. Everybody has been waiting for this face-off. Everybody. That's what you want. Even before Punk was signed to AEW, everybody was like, yo, imagine if like MJF and like Punk like faced off on the mic. Yeah. So you finally get this fantasy matchup where you have MJF and Punk based on their mic skills alone, what happened? What happened? Because MJF like under deliver. If that was Chris Jericho, which you were saying long term, that was Chris Jericho on the mic with Punk facing off, it would have been stellar. I think that MJF got scared. Sorry, MJF. You can tell me to go F myself. I don't know how they're going to save this at this point.
Well, I think the only way that they save this is to close out the story. Eventually, it's going to have to. They're going to wrestle, and they're going to have to settle. They're going to have to settle. You got to settle it
in the ring. Settle in the ring. But anyway, so we digressed off of Rampage. Moving on. Going back into Rampage.
Yes, back to Rampage. This podcast. The topic of this podcast.
Jade Cargill versus
Janai Kai,
who hasn't officially been signed,
right,
but is being trained by Thunder Rosa.
The goddess herself, Jade Cargill. Boy, am I a big fan.
I mean, I tagged you in the podcast last week. I tagged Jade because I said you were such a fanboy. This was your match.
Stand for Jade. Oh man.
Storm herself, as we keep saying, because she looks a hell of a lot like Storm.
I'm going to let you take this. I'm going to let you take the reins on this one, Mayor, because this was fairly cut and dry.
It was a splash match, which we were talking about this before we got on. You didn't know what a squash match was. Somebody who wins something in 2 minutes and it completely is dominating over a jobber, as you would say. Ham and egger. Yes, it was a squash match between Jade Cargill and Janai Kai, who is underneath Thunder Rosa, who Thunder Rosa is facing off against Jade in the quarterfinals for the inaugural TBS Women's Championship title. And we've been going back and forth about this. I thought that the Thunder Rosa match was this week. Obviously, I was wrong.
I thought it was this week as well. I thought it was this week as well.
Nothing really much to see here. Jade dominated her, crushed her, and grinded her into a powder, which Matt wishes that Jade would do to him on a nightly basis. What was that?
If Jade Cargill needs somebody to mash into a very fine paste, she can do that.
To you.
I love you.
But at the end of the match, Thunder Rosa and her went after it. Thunder Rosa was on commentary during the match. She went down after her student, I guess you could say, got squashed by Jade. And they went at it for a little bit. It was a good hype. I always like when the women do the angle that the men would normally do, where they have to get pulled apart, because the women don't do that much.
There was a key phrase from I believe it was Taz. AEW has had this trend where key rivals will be commentating at the commentary table. And at the end of the match, said rival will say, "I've had enough. I can't take any more of this." And they'll throw down the headset and they'll take off to the ring.
I mean, every wrestling promotion rarely does that.
They all do that. AEW has been leaning on it. I feel like maybe a little bit too frequently, quite frankly.
They always have an interference. Yes, it's one.
There's always an interference from the guest commentator. I believe Taz. I think Taz, as Thunder Rosa took off her headset and took off of the ring to attack Jade Cargill. I think it was Taz who said, "Why does everybody do that?" And I had to send you a text because I was like, "That's hilarious." Yes,
which is fine.
It's a bit that's getting a bit long in the tooth. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see Jade and Thunder Rosa actually wrestle, because Jade, well, here's the thing. If you couldn't tell, Jade is a physical force. She is almost double the size of most of the wrestlers, the female wrestlers in the league. So Jade Cargill, who is, again, carved out of the side of a mountain, she will probably not lose. She's going to be considering my title as the Wrestling Whisperer. I believe she is going to be the TNT Women's Champion, without a doubt, in my mind. You're right. She will probably face off against Ruby Soho in the final.
You're still going with it. You're saying that Jade takes this whole entire thing.
I think Jade absolutely goes all the way and takes the title because she is just that much of a force. And I'm surprised that she's a heel. I think it's unfortunate because I think she
looks like a heel, dude. There's no way
she absolutely looks like a heel. Yes. And I'm sure that there are plenty of listeners who are listening to this podcast who are screaming at me and searching for my Twitter handle to tell me I'm very wrong, who want to say that she's a bad wrestler.
I still think she's green. I don't think she's a bad wrestler. I just think she's
green. Sure. But at the same time, she is an incredible force. And I feel like that if you're that big and you're that strong, you can potentially really harm someone if you're not at the apex of your craft. And I think maybe she's probably working on that. But that being said, I do think that she goes all the way. And I do think that, she's definitely going to beat Thunder Rosa. It's going to be, I hope, a good match. And I think at the end of the road of this tournament, she will be the champion. And then we'll see where things go at that point. But I think Ruby finally loses from her debut match at All In. I think she's absolutely going to go to the final with Jade, and then I think she's going to drop the Jade. It's just the way I see it. I could be wrong. This is probably, that's my heart. My heart is saying that Jade is going to go all the way, and she's going to be the first women's TNT champion.
TBS.
But my gut is saying
TBS champion.
Ruby is going to stop Jade's streak, and she is going to become the women's champion. That's my gut. My heart says Jade. My gut says Ruby. We'll see which one is right.
Okay, so just to correct Mappy right now, it's the TBS championship, not the TNT championship.
Oh, TBS. I'm sorry. The Turner Broadcasting System champion.
We're going back to WCW days, man. It's TBS.
You're right. Okay, my apologies.
I understand what you're saying. I just think that, like I said last week, Ruby has a lot behind her. She looks different. I think she was completely underutilized in WWE. She's a fantastic wrestler. The match that she had on Wednesday was great. Her reactions, her selling, like her being bug-eyed and stuff like that. And she pulled it off. I told you, I think Jade's going to be a star. I just don't think this is her time. I would rather see Jade get the AEW championship and pull it off of Britt Baker, because Britt Baker is dominating everybody. And it would take a lot of somebody who could deal with her outside interference with Jamie Hayter and Rebel, have somebody who could take on the three of them and not get phased because she's so strong, and take Britt Baker off her throne. That would make more sense to me, not for an inaugural champ. They want somebody who is solid. I think Jade is a strong presence, like you said. She's star. She's beautiful. She's carved out of stone, but she's still very green. I don't think she's a terrible wrestler. I just think that she's still green, and she has a lot of power, and she hasn't figured out how to navigate that or infiltrate it into her wrestling dynamic. I think she still needs more progress, because I'm very new with AEW people. I don't know what her history is, if she was an independent or if she was just really starting out and she just got signed to AEW. I don't know that. So I just think that Jade is too green. I don't think she's a bad wrestler. I just think she's too green. And if she's not up to par in the ring, and I feel like AEW is focusing on these things where WWE is just based on looks. Listen, if Jade was in WWE, she'd be champ right now.
She would be absolutely 100%.
100%. She would be a Nia Jax who, even if she was terrible in the ring, she would be champ based on her look and her strength.
It's almost like she's the most WWE on the AEW roster.
I would agree with that. I would
Because-
absolutely agree with that.
And I talk a big game because I'm very
Biased. You're biased.
I am biased because, man, she's an attractive human being, but she is absolutely 100%. I'm sure that Vince, if he ever tunes into TNT to
He
catch,
doesn't do that.
no, of course not.
AEW
No,
is
not at all. But if
competition
ever,
for WWE, what are you
if ever
talking about?
anyone shoved some footage of one of the lady wrestlers in front of Vince, he would see her and he would salivate because
No, she has a look.
She looks like $1 million. And
she looks like $1 million. I love her look. I think she's gorgeous. I don't give a crap that
we're going very deep into physical, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, but that's the point, though. That's my point. I think you're basing it more on looks, where AEW is trying to go past that, and that's why I think Ruby is a good fit because, as I said last week with you, she is alternative looking, even though for our generation she's normal. Like, to be quite honest, it's the people that are in positions that are above us that look at somebody like Ruby Soho and they're like, she's not marketable, but she's the chick that I hang out with on a week. It's nonsense. It's old school thinking. But I'm just saying, if AEW is the alternative to WWE and somebody like Ruby Soho, who is very seasoned at this point, she has been an independent wrestler, she has been on the radar for a while, you give the up incumbents to her because she's not carved out of stone and she doesn't have the marketable look. And I think that perfects her coming there. She is the biggest female signing that company has had. So I think that, like, while you think that Jade is like, that works, that's not what AEW as a whole is trying to do.
All right, so let's agree on the fact that this was
I still think Thunder Rosa is going to give her a run for her money, though. Thunder Rosa,
absolutely, 100%. It's going to be. I'm very much looking forward to that. It will certainly not be a squash match, as
no,
it will not by any means. Thunder Rosa is very popular, and she deserves to be popular. And I like her a whole lot.
Man, I love
she's
her.
Great, and I love her a whole lot. But she's absolutely not. She is going to lose Jade in the next round, and then we're going to get to that point. But that being said, this was just setting the stage for a very solid face-off, and then eventually leading into the finals, which I'm excited for. I'm genuinely excited for the women's finals, for the TBS title. Excuse me, TBS, not TNT, but TBS title. Thank you.
So last match was your
both
favorite wrestler
and substantial. Yes.
So Matt's favorite wrestler since he has started watching again is Pac.
In AEW, I was going to get to this absolutely because it sure might seem strange, but the Bastard Pac is absolutely my favorite wrestler in not only AEW but
in general,
possibly in general. Like, the dude is,
and he's great.
He is phenomenal. But let me just, to intro, it was the Bastard Pac. Penta el Zero Miedo. And for the sake of brevity, we're going to be calling him Penta.
Penta, yes. But I appreciate your Spanish introduction.
Thank you. So the Bastard and Penta versus FTR. Pac is definitely my favorite wrestler in AEW right now. I love him.
Can I cut you off? Why is Pac your favorite wrestler?
Okay, so he is, as far as the wrestling goes, forget the mic skills. The dude is from Newcastle, if I'm not mistaken. Although he's, cut a couple of promos here and there, and dude has, he's got his very unique accent from the northern portion of Ingerland. just below the Scottish border, if I'm not mistaken. Newcastle, if anybody from Newcastle area is listening to this, my apologies for butchering the location for where you are.
It was a particular thing, though. You said that when we were talking about it, he has a particular accent, right?
Yes, it's called the Geordie accent.
Geordie accent, yes.
So Pac is pound for pound my favorite wrestler currently in AEW. Now, I would say that between him and Kenny Omega, you're getting the best wrestling potentially in the world at the moment. Not just me. I think Kenny Omega is truly an amazing talent and quite possibly the best wrestler working at the moment. Mary, you might disagree. Doesn't matter.
I'm not going to argue the Kenny Omega thing. I didn't really know about it before I started watching AEW. Everybody said Kenny Omega is the best wrestler on the planet. I'm not going to disagree. You got to understand that I am WWE biased and like what I've seen. You put Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson, who, I'm sorry, I don't give a F who you are. Bryan Danielson is maybe, that's why that whole storyline happened, the best wrestler on the planet. Despite like CM Punk's like best in the world stuff, that's just a gimmick. I mean, I love Punk, but he's not the best wrestler on the planet. And then my other pick is AJ Styles. AJ Styles and Kenny Omega, that match, if it ever happens, which I think it's already happened in New Japan before, Styles got signed to WWE. I don't have an argument to move for that. And somebody coming in who hasn't really watched wrestling in a long time, I'm never going to argue Omega. I don't know enough about him. I like his mic skills. I like his character. He's kind of a weirdo. I think it's cool, but you're absolutely right. So continue.
All right. So just to roll the tape back just a bit. So for anybody who is in doubt of the bastard Pac and his skills, and my passion for, I guess, the ability of Kenny Omega, both he and Kenny Omega, go back to go to YouTube and do a search for All Out 2019 Kenny Omega versus the Bastard Pac. It is probably one of the best wrestling matches I have ever seen.
Matt pulling out the nerd stuff man.
It is phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. And, I've been a fan of this guy. It's been building for quite some time. And he's fantastic. He gives 100% of his ability in every single match. There are certain wrestlers, such as Hangman, Adam Page, such as Kenny Omega, Adam Cole. There are these wrestlers who are putting it all out for every single performance. And you know what? I'd actually put CM Punk on that list as well, because he really, despite what people might say about his ability at his current age, what have you, he's putting it all out there.
He's putting it all out there.
I also want to give credit to Eddie Kingston, because Eddie Kingston absolutely deserves it as well. Because Eddie Kingston, these are guys who are putting it down on the line, and they are giving it their all for just a simple televised match. They are really giving like a performance that is pay-per-view grade. And that's where I'm judging a lot of my passion for these wrestlers these days. And the Bastard is, every single time that dude comes out, he is laying it down. Not only does he sell it really well when he takes a bump, but man, he lays it out and he makes you believe it. There are times where it's like he's landing some of the kicks and he's landing some of his throws, or he's jumping off of the top turnbuckle. It's like, holy shit, he's putting his life, this dude is putting his life on the line. And so that leads me to, and then one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight Pac in this discussion was because this whole angle with, he's wearing an eye patch in this this match in Rampage. He's got an eye patch, and the televised angle is that
he can't see. Basically, he can't.
He can't see out of his
eye off
because Aleister Black blasted
the black mist.
The mist into his eyes, so he can't see. Now, there was a moment, and this is me being, I guess, a mark for professional wrestling. But in one of those past matches, I think that last match between Pac and Andrade El Idolo and Aleister Black and Cody Rhodes.
Not Aleister Black, actually.
No?
No.
Am I wrong about that?
It's Malachi Black.
Have I been saying Aleister the entire time?
Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. It's all interchangeable. Tommy End. Let's go back to
Malachi Black. I'm sorry.
Malachi Black.
I'm getting names mixed up. So Malachi Black, Cody Rhodes, the Bastard Pack, and Andrade El Idolo. A great matchup. And it actually seemed like Pac got injured at one point. And maybe that's because I just wanted to buy into some plot line. What have you? I don't know. But the dude was laid out at the end of that match. And I bought into it. And then all of a sudden, 1 week later, he's got an eye patch over his eyeball. Now, if he wasn't actually injured, then ultimately what you have is a professional wrestler who is having to operate under false pretenses with an eye patch over his eyeball. And if for those of you who have not maybe had to wear an eye patch in the past, depth perception is greatly reduced when you only have the use of one eye. So I can only imagine how difficult it must be for anybody in professional wrestling, let alone any other sport, to have to perform with one eye. So if that
that's
eye
completely and obviously it's so jarring.
So
even if he's not actually injured, if you have one thing off.
If his eye is actually injured, which I kind of feel like he probably took some damage to the eye, maybe not because of the mist, but because he took a hit in the wrong way and it affected his vision. And he has to have an eye patch on. That sucks. It's terrible, but the dude is willing to go out there with an eye patch and still perform at an optimal level. If not, and if it's simply a prop to close in the whole storyline between Malachi Black and Pac and everybody else in that circle, that plot line they're going with, you're still a wrestler having to achieve the type of performance that you have to achieve with one eyeball. You didn't pull it off in the middle and say, hey, look, I'm not actually one-eyed. Now you have to fight me with two. It didn't happen. It was an amazing match. It was a fantastic match.
It was a very, very good match. Yeah. I mean, every argument that you have, that being your favorite wrestler, just because he is so talented, and even if this is a gimmick, which it probably is, his one eye being false, not being able to use it right now, that's a lot of work for a wrestler.
That is a lot of work to do all of that with one eye.
Especially when we're doing high flying moves like that. And then so getting to the end of the match, FTR is fantastic. It's old school. I love them. Tully Bradshaw got involved. He got injured. I was surprised that we didn't see somebody Sting or whatever. He involved himself in the match, but then Malachi Black came out and blinded him in the other eye. So that's the story going forward. I don't know what's going to happen with it. It was a good main event. I always love that these main events, even if they're tag team wrestling, what I said a couple weeks ago, my first podcast, I love the fact that they hype it up and there's a main event and there's a reason for that main event. So it was just a solid match. That guy is amazing. Everything about him is intriguing.
It's not based on nothing. There's enough content to go around where you can look up. There's so much talent in this organization, really is. And even when if you tune into Dark, which I'm imagining anyone who's listening to this podcast knows that AEW Dark is strictly internet based, and it seems to be where it's the place where the new talent is training up, and the current talent is getting a moment to train up for the main event, for televised events. It's good stuff. It's fun, and there's plenty of content that you can plumb through with these amazing wrestlers that have taken place in the past. I know that Omega was a known quantity before he joined AEW. Without a doubt, he had a following. I'm unfamiliar with his work outside of AEW. Gonna have to do some investigation myself, because man, he's phenomenal. And Pac is probably at the same level as Omega. Man, I gotta tell you, I absolutely love the upper echelon of this league. Is so entertaining to watch, and that's really what I'm going to get at. Is like I am enjoying the hell. This is bringing it all home. There, I'm enjoying the hell out of all of their broadcasts. There are times where I tune into Dark. Maybe I'm sitting at the computer and I want to throw it on YouTube and see what's going on, see some new talent, stuff like that. That's even fun. But these, every Wednesday and Friday, man, I am really wholly enjoying professional wrestling that is on the TV. And man, it's absolutely worth paying attention to, because there is simply not one game in town anymore. There is competition for WWE. And in my opinion, this is head and shoulders better than the product that WWE.
I mean, but at the end of the day, that's the problem, is that like you want WWE to step up. The WWE, despite all their releases that they've had in the last 2 years, they have a lot of talent, and they should be trying to like compete with these people. But like, because it's an upstart, but they have the backing, I think it's egregious, or I don't know if that's the right word. I'm throwing out words right now. It's just weird that you wouldn't, like I said last week, I had somebody come after me and they're like, you're just bashing Vince. No, I'm not. I just feel like competition makes everything better, right? And they're putting out a solid pocket products, and people aren't watching it necessarily right now. But like, if it's WWE, I understand that you want to be mainstream, but I feel like the way to be mainstream these days, especially being from where we're from, right? So like before pop culture was a thing, but it also started being like kind of sedimented when we were teenagers, right? You need to not be mainstream.
Can I just interject? Can I just interject here, Mayor, for a second? Because I want to point out that honestly, I don't care about the WWE.
No, but I understand that, Matt. No, I'm not trying to cut you off, because you've already said this a million times during this podcast. I understand that you don't care about WWE. I get that. I completely get that. As somebody who has been a loyal WWE fan for 30 years plus, I get it. But to have people be like, oh, you're an AEW mark or anything, like you're just going to bash everything that WWE is doing, that's not fair. I want WWE to succeed. There's so many people that are in that company still, even though their roster is very slim right now. It's just, listen, I'm an old school guy, as I was saying, alluding to when we grew up and when we were teenagers, and like mainstream was not cool. It was everything that was alternative, and that's what's sold. And now we are the elders. Unfortunately, I hate saying that. Like, I hate saying that we're the old people in the room. We are, to an extent. But this is the product that you sold to us as we were teenagers. We're going to be spending money if we have kids, if we do not. I want WWE to succeed. And I feel like them not taking them seriously, even for a minuscule, is detrimental to their whole product. It's detrimental to pro wrestling as a whole. Competition always breeds good things, right?
Clearly, you wouldn't get AEW. You wouldn't get this product if you didn't have WWE, and that's my.
But AEW is firing on all cylinders, and WWE is not.
But in part because the WWE is not. And here's the thing: here we are. We're on an AEW podcast because that's what this is. Granted, it might be on an unofficial WWE podcast company.
That's how it started off.
Umbrella. But for me, here's the thing, Mayor. I understand your perspective. Here's the thing. I don't give a damn about WWE. I don't care about what they're doing. I think what they're doing is bad. I think what AEW was doing is fantastic, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it through and through. And that is really the end of the story.
Don't you think as a whole, if you are now getting back into professional wrestling and you're seeing shades of what made you a fan to begin with, and anybody like you and me who was born in the early 80s, late 70s, and grew up on this stuff and saw all this stuff happen with the wrestling wars and stuff like that.
Sure.
As a person, if you're a fan of professional wrestling, and this is why I've been getting like catty with people, don't, in some aspect, even if you don't give a about WWE, don't you want them to succeed in some point of way? You want them to take them seriously so they could do good products. Because again, what I go back to is, even though all the talent that WWE has released in the last 2 years, they still have a stellar roster. I'm trying to remove myself, and you know how I am, and we talk about this. You're somewhat that, but you know how anti-established I am and how anti-corporate and all that stuff. I want WWE to succeed. They hoarded talent because they didn't want another promotion to come up that they would have to compete with. And they got screwed because we got Tony Khan and all these guys, and they did this federation. This is the first thing since when you fell out of wrestling in 2001 that is actually competition for WWE, right? Don't you want, in some aspect, to see the talent? You just think the talent on WWE is bad because they're putting out a bad product. It's not bad talent. It's micromanagement.
Understand. Let me clarify.
So don't you want, okay, hold on. But don't you want them to kind of succeed in some sort of way? Because then you're like, oh crap, that's going to make AEW better, and that's going to make WWE better.
Let me clarify. I don't think that the talent is bad. I think that the product is bad. Recently, just a couple of hours ago, from when we started recording this, I was on YouTube, and I saw a podcast or a YouTuber who was interviewing Becky Lynch. And the question to Becky Lynch was, do you view AEW as the competition to WWE? And Becky Lynch said, no, they're not. I don't view them as competition. I just view them as a different product. And that's, a very... That's valid, sure. It might be a bit of a cop-out. It's a different thing, without a doubt. But that being said, it's the quality of the thing that I have a problem with. As a fan, or as a casual fan, because I can't call myself, the people who are listening to this podcast, who've lasted this long, they're the fans. Mary, you're a fan of this stuff. I am a casual. I'm a dirty casual. But that being said, the product is the thing that I have a problem with. It's not the talent. I genuinely believe, and going to roll it back a bit to the podcast that we released last week that I was a part of, where I said I had a couple of predictions for the talent who would eventually cross over in AEW. And that was Kevin Owens,
Sami
Zayn, and I actually think that AJ Styles will wind up there as well, despite the fact, his age, what have you, he's probably going to retire, blah, blah, blah. There's talent in WWE that simply feel like they'd be a far, far better fit in AEW. Not because of their talent level, but because the product is bad. The WWE product to me is bad. The AEW product to me is good. And it allows this talent, of which there is substantial amount of talent in the WWE, who would be able to flourish in AEW. Because it's forget the pomp and circumstance and forget the glitz and glamour of the WWE. You're getting a distilled version, in my opinion. You're getting a distilled version of the actual sport, the athleticism that these people are capable of. Like, you don't need the soap opera, you don't need the drama. Oh, you're going to get that. Wrestling is supposed to be dramatic. It's supposed to be.
It's a male soap opera. It is literally the male soap opera.
That's what it is. But my point is like the act is substantially better in AEW. That's just my take, and I'm going to die on this hill. I truly believe that a lot of the talent that are there having to work. I don't want to blame everything on Vince McMahon. But having to work under the umbrella of WWE hinders their ability to truly flourish at what they're very talented at. That's my point. That's it. That's why I enjoy the hell out of this thing. I really do. I'm tuning in every week to see where the storylines go and see what characters go where. But ultimately, it's like, damn, these guys are bringing it. They are bringing it almost every single week.
So it seems like what you're saying is WWE is lazy. And I think that is with any corporate structure, they're the big dogs.
I don't want to say lazy because I think that's detriment to the people who...
I think they have roadblocks. I think that they have talented people in creative. And Vince is just so out of touch that it becomes a yes man situation. And that's why I say the corporate thing. I mean, everybody like Tony Khan, blah, 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 but he's a fan. And I think at the end of the day, like WWE's problem, or has been their problem, is that they're hiring TV writers and they're trying to be way too mainstream. I feel like that they could achieve mainstream status like they did when Stone Cold was, hot, and Punk was hot. Punk was selling more than Cena. You become mainstream when you're not worried about it. And I think that's the problem. But I also think that WWE actually needs to recognize that AEW is not a TNA or it's not an ROH. And I think that's a disservice to them. I think the whole NXT crap that has gone down, and I'm not a huge Triple H fan. I'm really not. But I know that Triple H was doing really good things in NXT, and we're going to see in the next couple of months, at the end of the year, Gargano and the guys that I was showing you in NXT, because Matt wasn't watching any of this stuff. And I was like, oh, we need to watch Gargano versus Ciampa. And you're like, all right, whatever.
Phenomenal.
Holy crap.
Phenomenal
matches. So Gargano and Ciampa, the residents of NXT that are still there, I don't know what's going to happen. I think if they were pulled up to main roster on WWE, they have nothing to do with them. Adam Cole, that's what I
have nothing to do.
They
and
have
that's
nothing for
point.
them.
Imagine,
Johnny Gargano, if he's not on NXT, he needs to be in AEW because they're not going to know what to do with him. It's the same thing with Adam Cole, you know? So we're going to see in the next couple months how that reels out. And I just think it's a disservice to, like, again, not being a huge Triple H fan in general. I think Triple H doesn't get enough credit because Triple H is still, despite what I think about him, he's in touch. You have a 76-year-old man running a federation where he's the end all be all. And everybody's like, oh, he has to have a hand in NXT. It was very clear that he didn't, because NXT would be NXT 2.0 right now if he was watching it. And Tripp's having a health issue randomly, and all this stuff happened while Trips was out. I mean, you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but like the people that listen to this podcast, if they're wrestling fans, they know exactly what I'm talking about right now. At the end of the day, I want WWE to succeed. That is the reason why I watch wrestling. I don't want Vince to kick the bucket. I just want Vince to, like, no, not be Hulk Hogan, not be Brett Favre. Know your time is up, and let people that are more in tune do your stuff, because I think that WWE could be a great product.
Well, Mayor, you can't teach an old dog with a massive ego. Here's my thing, because you mentioned this before. Gargano and Ciampa. Also, amazing. some of the most amazing professional wrestling matches that I think you can get, pound for pound, bar none. Those two guys know how to scrap. And the fact that they are a WWE product, it's a WWE product. Imagine if they do get called up to the main roster. Happening. What's going to happen?
I don't think it's happening. I think
Gargano, it's probably not going to happen. But imagine,
leaving. I think Ciampa is leaving.
But imagine, who cares? Imagine if they get picked up in AEW. You're going to have those matches with those two guys, not only between the two of them, but mixed up with the rest of that roster, and how good it's going to be, how good it can be. And that is how bullish I am on AEW as a wrestling league. I believe in it. And sure, does that make me a mark? I guess.
No, it doesn't. It proves the fact that you are somebody that has just come back into the wrestling fold, and you can recognize that if Ciampa and Gargano are called up to the main roster, they're going to crap the bed. Like, they've crapped the bed with every NXT character that has been super over, and NXT was the answer for mainstream independent wrestling. That, like, Triple H built that whole thing. You recognize it. So wrapping it up.
To wrap it up.
It was a good Rampage this week. Everything was
very
cool.
Good Rampage.
We will see what happens next week. This weekend is War Games. We were talking about NXT. And it has to do with Gargano and Ciampa. I'm pretty sure. I'm actually going to watch this pay-per-view. It's going to be the first pay-per-view for NXT that I've watched in a while, just because I want to see what the new structure is. But yeah, fun wrestling week. This was a rant, Matt. For somebody who is not saying that they're not a wrestling fan.
Ooh.
You kind of seem like a wrestling fan.
Episode 3. I'm not entirely sure what's going to hit the cutting room floor, but rest assured, when you're hearing this, Mary and I have gone on some wild tangents about wrestling, both AEW and the WWE. To say the least, we got takes. We got takes. But look, listen, speaking of takes, before we wrap up the show, Mayor, the final segment to wrap it all up is Hot Takes. hot takes.
Is it hot takes? We already had our hot takes. Are we doing conspiracy theories?
No, I haven't had my hot take.
Oh,
you
okay.
had your hot take.
So wait, hold on. Hot takes by Matt Tomasetti. Go for it. Go.
Okay, are you ready? Are you ready for this? I just want to state for the record, to roll the tape back, that Mary's hot take was that Chris Jericho is the greatest of all time.
He's a goat.
Hot take. Okay, he's the GOAT. Chris Jericho, the GOAT. Fair enough. My hot take, a bit less spicy. And you know, it's a hot take. It's a hot take. The entrance music for the Gun Club. I love. It might be my favorite. Now, I will state that Hangman Adam Page has amazing entrance music. Amazing. It's great. But there's something about whatever the Gun Club, whatever that music is, whatever the entrance theme for the Gun Club is for Billy Gunn and I guess his sons.
Yes. Apparently those are his kids.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm still waiting, like, not to like overtake your hot take. I'm still waiting for Dolph Ziggler in WWE.
Sure,
to
that's
in AEW and be Billy Gunn's adopted kid.
Mary, you don't get 2 hot takes per episode. I don't care if this is your podcast.
No, that was a conspiracy theory. That wasn't a hot take.
Club. My hot take was the Gun Club's intro music is the best in AEW. That's my opinion. I love it. I actually want to download it and listen to it. It's pretty good. I might be the only one.
I don't know their music enough to know if it's like the best. I'm trying.
I'll send it to you afterward.
I think Kenny Omega's music is the best music.
I love Kenny Omega's
because it's Street Fighter and anime and like the whole Omega and him coming from New Japan and stuff like that.
New Japan, blah blah blah.
I think that's the best music.
There's something about the Gun Club.
So on that note, follow me on Twitter at Mare, MARE _ bear, BARE. Not like a bear like naked. I like to make that joke. Follow the WWE podcast at wrestling _ audio. And follow if you would like stupid takes from Matt Tomasetti at Matt of Myth on Twitter. Hopefully we'll see you next week and it won't as all over the place. Take care. We'll see you next week. Late.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.